story started with a man bleeding and struggling to breathe. He thought about how far they had come. Laser beams rained down on them. He held on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, they could defeat the enemy. But in an instant, something stabbed him in the chest. He froze. It took him a moment to realize there was now a hole in his chest. He dropped to his knees. That's when it hit him. It was a freaking deadly blow. He collapsed face first on the ground. He then had a thought about how he'd end up dying without being able to do anything. His blurry eyes stared straight ahead. He was looking at the flying humanoid creature, mankind's greatest enemy, called the Liquidator. One day, this unknown being appeared and wiped out an entire continent. In this world, a special group was formed to defend humanity against these monsters. The first member was a man known for surviving a massive meteor strike without a single scratch, using nothing but a shield, mind you. Because of that, people called him the world's protecting shield, Brian Millier. There was also a great sage said to have power equal to an entire division. She is the great sage Bella Albright. In addition to that is an archer who took down a high-level dragon in a single shot. His name is Jacob Bloomfield, the divine archer. Then there's the strongest swordsman to ever come into existence, the sword saint, Amy White. And then there was them, a group called the support unit. Corpses were already scattered all over the area. The man on the brink of death, our MC, was the foot soldier Gray Lee, who thinks that they are just sacrificial pawns. He watched those elite group fights and thought of how they are on another level. He knew that the graduates of the World Union Academy were amazing, but he didn't expect that the gap between them would be that wide. Those elites unleashed attacks that hit the Liquidator. It made him feel bad. Because he questioned if it mattered if the support unit were there or not. Amy continued to engage in a battle with the Liquidator. She tried to stab him with really fast movements. Gray grits his teeth. Witnessing the wide gap, even if they had trained hard, was painful for him to the point that it made him cry. The Liquidator skillfully evades the blades, until one blade scratched him. He was impressed that Amy was able to injure him. So he became serious. He unleashed a fast strike, and that skillfully cut off the elite's body in half. They had fallen as their blood gushed out of their body. Gray's eyes widened in shock. Liquidator showed his true skill now that he's done playing around. Gray couldn't believe that he took them out in a single blow. He realized that he was just playing until then. It pained him to admit that there's no way that they could win. He laid there in his pool of blood, but he was still conscious. Time has passed since his heart got pierced, so it was a puzzle to him why he's still alive. When his blood dripped, someone had spoken weakly, "I finally found you." The drop of blood turned into a small light, and eventually it became a message. Gray was called to come forth, for he wields great power. He woke up surprised. When he looked at his surroundings, it was a dark place with several stone structures, so he asked where he was. It made him think that it's the afterlife, though. It's quite barren. Aside from that, he also noticed someone was sitting on a throne. This person gives an impression of a god, with its black clothing, horns, and veil that covers its forehead, and a golden mark on its chest. It had a calm, stoic face. The mysterious creature spoke to him, saying that he had not perished, and informed him that his physical wounds have already been healed. Then Gray had something in mind. His injured body was shown on a screen. He asked him if he healed him. He replied that it wasn't him, but it was Gray's own power. That made Gray confused. The mysterious creature couldn't explain it to him because he was also unable to properly analyze Gray's power. But he guarantees him that his power is stronger than what the Liquidator possesses, but only if he can control it properly. Gray asked him if it meant that they could win the battle. He replied that he doesn't know and wouldn't have high hopes in yet, but he also believes they ought to get rid of the Liquidator. Which is why he stood up and pierced Gray's chest, so he could go. Then, a bright blue light appeared. A magic circle appeared on Gray's chest. The voice declared that he shall lend him his power. Eventually, Gray woke up on his bloodied corpse. He grabbed his sword. The tip of the sword was covered in dark energy. He was told that it is his own power. The mysterious creature told him that his power is not something that is visible in the naked eye. Gray understood. The Liquidator then noticed him. Without hesitation, Gray slashed the Liquidator. It saw his face. He couldn't believe that there was still a strong person remaining. His chest was scratched. Gray realized that his attack did some damage. He charged again. He was confident to say that his power was stronger than him, but Liquidator advised him not to underestimate him. The next thing Gray knew is that he was shocked. It took him time to process what just happened. His body was cut in half. Only his lower half remained, and blood gushed out from it like a fountain. Liquidator commended him for pushing him to use his all. Unexpectedly, a black mist covered the area, and a hooded man appeared. He had a mask on his face. His body was similar to a black flame. He raised his black, gigantic sword. The Liquidator was confused. He immediately created a barrier around him. The black flame was extinguished on the left side of his face, and from there, Gray can already be recognized. The Liquidator asked if he's truly human. Gray glared at him. Then he attacked him. His sword met the barrier. He tries to break through it. The Liquidator then noticed something. His barrier was shattered and the sword slashed him. He asked him again if he's truly human. Gray answered that he was wondering the same thing. Then he took a step. Gray acknowledged that Liquidator's strength isn't a joke. It didn't expect him to still be alive. It started breathing heavily. Liquidator approached him and whispered that he's going to crush him over and over until he's dead, but Gray attacked first. Liquidator was cut, and his yellow blood splattered. He called him a monster. But it wasn't about to be defeated there. Light surrounded its body as it built up more power. He joined his hands until a magic circle appeared. He stated that time's up. Our MC held onto his big-ass sword as he waited for the Liquidator's next move. Gray was surprised that it suddenly became night, but it didn't matter to him. He went behind him. He thought of slicing his neck, but his sword was blocked by his barrier. It surprised him. Liquidator told him that it's futile because within the plane of true dusk, nothing is capable of harming him. So he advised him to better stop his useless resistance and take a look at the stars. Gray's eyes widened. The star was reflected on his eyes. It got bigger and shone brightly in his eyes. Liquidator states that it's beautiful. It was like the sun, and suddenly it fell from the sky. The impact was destructive. The shooting star made a crater on the ground, and our MC could not be found. Liquidator expected that he won't be able to revive if he's completely pulverized to dust. But he was surprised when a portal started to form, and it became a large magic circle. Then someone spoke, acknowledging the great amount of power gathered. He expected that it was enough to take him back. The Liquidator recognized that it was Kronos. Kronos asked the one who wields great power if he could hear him. And since he used all of his power, he decided to send him back to the past. Liquidator cursed at Kronos. Kronos told Gray that it's all he can do for him. The magic clock started ticking. It counted backwards. When it reached 1, he told him that he entrusted the fate of the world to him. With that, Gray woke up from a nap while laying on the grass. He was confused about where he was. Our MC woke up in the middle of a field. The sky was bright and the grass was green. He then looked on his right and recognized that it was his hometown, Renato Village. He was puzzled because it shouldn't be there because it was destroyed 15 years ago. Then he recalled that he was advised to be sent back to the past. He couldn't fathom that it really happened. He propped himself on his hand, but he saw the wound. Around that time, he was being picked on by Belder and the others. This time, he told himself not to be beaten by guys like them, but he knew that those guys were strong and he just couldn't beat them. He sighed and stated that defeating Liquidator was just a dream. He decided to think about how to deal with them once he's a bit stronger because he didn't want to get hurt, but while walking in the forest. Unfortunately, he ran into them. The leader was the biggest bully of them all named Belder. The asshole was with 3 young men. He told Gray that he had been looking for him, and he had a lot of trouble finding him. Gray was cautious. Belder threw a sword in front of him and told him to pick it up. He looked clueless, which is why Belder called him out not to act dumb. He wanted to have a mock battle. Gray refused, saying that his injury hasn't healed yet. He thanked him for the invitation and told him that he can't partake until his injury heals. Belder replied that he has nothing to worry since the blade is blunt. Gray reasoned that no matter how blunt the blade is, it is still a lump of iron and it can still injure someone if hit in the wrong place. Belder yelled at him to shut his fucking mouth. He told him that he didn't have the right to say no, and if he doesn't like swords, he told him that he can just fight without a weapon. Belder immediately charged forward. Gray was caught off guard. He couldn't believe that he wanted to beat him even when he was unarmed. Now it didn't seem like that intention was truly a mock battle. He remembered what the military doctor told him before he was sent back. The doctor said that the reason that his swordsmanship wasn't improving was because of an injury he had sustained as a child. And reflecting on it, he could tell that it is where his life as a loser began. He sidestepped to evade Belder's attack. Then it confused him. Belder clicked his tongue in annoyance. While Gray was wondering if Belder's strikes were always that slow. He ducked to avoid another attack. They engage into a dance-like motion, wherein Belder attacks and he evades it. He realized that it wasn't because Belder was slow. Belder got annoyed that he couldn't hit him. The sword was an inch away from Gray's face, but he moved swiftly to evade and closed the gap between them. He realized that the correct answer was he had gotten faster. The other three young men were surprised with his move. They stated that it seemed like he's a completely different person. He went to pick up the sword. He knew that he might not have the body that he used to have, but he has the memories of the battles that he fought. Belder leapt to slash him. Even if the attack was coming from behind, he skillfully deflected it by swinging the sword using his uninjured hand. Belder got hit, and he let out a small groan. Gray didn't expect that it was enough to throw him off his feet. It made him question if it's okay to fight against such an amateur, but he thought that the guy isn't someone who deserves pity. He reasoned that it was those pieces of trash who tormented him because he couldn't fight. But this time, it wasn't the case anymore. He attacked, resulting in Belder letting go of his sword. Belder cursed out loud. Seeing that he let go of his sword easily, Gray could tell that he's worse than an amateur. He told him that he probably wasn't trained on how to receive a blow from a sword. Our MC stepped in front of Belder and told him that there's nothing to worry about, as he held on to his sword. He quoted that as long as the blade has been dulled, it would be totally safe to beat someone with it. Belder got hit. He couldn't believe his shoulder just bled. When blood splattered on his face, it made him cry out loud and fell on his knees. Gray didn't expect that the blade wasn't blunted, but when he checked, it was completely blunt. And had it been a sharp sword, Belder might have actually been killed. He glared at them and continued to strike. Belder was hit on the nose. He bled a lot as he fell on his back. Gray decided to keep using the blunt edge. He towered over Belder and asked why he's screaming so much. He didn't have the right to do so when he's the one who told him that a blunt sword is safe. He grinned devilishly at him. Belder started to get scared. He yelled at those three young men to stop standing around and beat his ass. Those three were scared because Gray got strong all of a sudden. One of them suggested they go together from behind. They surrounded him. Gray asked them if they wanted another round. Belder ordered those three to kill him. Gray stated that he was going to overlook it, but he changed his mind. The forest was indeed disturbed. Those four ended up all bruised up with a large bump on their heads, and they could barely open their eyes. They meekly kneel with their weight on their heels, hands gently resting on their lap. Gray remembered how he's been so scared of those guys before. He asked them if they were from the Serious Swordsmanship Dojo. Belder replied that it was something like that. One of them said that they felt like they have gotten strong enough, so they haven't been going lately. In his head, he questioned their meaning of strong enough. He realized that he shouldn't expect much from the dojo itself, but regardless, he knew it would have uses. He wanted to be introduced to the dojo because it was by referral only. Belder told him to ask someone else because if he told his master that he lost, he couldn't imagine what they would say. Gray swung his sword in front of Belder and suggested that they should just continue what they're doing. Naturally, Belder got scared. He ran off while yelling that the dojo is that way. They were all surprised how fast he was. Those three yelled at him not to leave them behind. They soon entered the city. Belder asked him why he wanted to enter a dojo. He stated that it was because the dojo has a recommendation slot for the academy. Belder confirmed that he heard something like that. Our MC responded that that was the reason he wanted to go. One of the lackeys expressed that Gray is already strong enough without going to the academy. Gray expressed that it would be nice if that was actually enough. But he knew that even the world's strongest lineup was no match for the Liquidator. And even when he used Kronos' power, he couldn't even scratch him when he got serious. He had no idea how strong he needed to be to defeat that thing. But still, he had some clues. Belder then pointed at the direction of the dojo, and he nodded. The moment he clashed with Liquidator, he felt it for a second, that he was able to control that dark power. And what he focused on at that moment was the swordsmanship taught to him by the Sword Saint. He thought that if he had spent more time training in swordsmanship, in the same conditions as the Sword Saint, then he knew the battle's outcome might have been different. He's aware that it was the reason why Kronos sent him there. They eventually arrived at the dojo, and the woman heard them. She tried to confirm if the bastards tried to pick on a civilian with the swordsmanship that they learned from her, and they just ended up getting their ass handed to them. She clicked her tongue. This woman was the swordsmanship dojo instructor, Saria. Belder tried to reason that they weren't picking on him because it was a mock battle. She responded by hitting him so powerfully that he got blasted away and hit the wall with a loud wham. The other three had their eyes widened in shock and trembled in fear. She knew he was just making up excuses. She told them that if he calls beating up someone unarmed a mock battle, then it would mean that what she did just then was also a mock battle. She pointed her sword at his eyes while telling him to leave and never return. She told them that they can no longer call themselves a student of the dojo from then on. They all replied yes and scurried away. She sat in front of Gray and apologized. She acknowledged that her former students caused him a lot of trouble. He replied that there's no need to worry about it. She thanked him for his understanding, and then she brought up the topic that he wanted to get a recommendation to the academy. She wanted to apologize for the trouble Belder and those guys caused, but as much as she'd like to write a letter of recommendation, she had to confirm his abilities first. She handed him a wooden sword. Gray accepted. She told him that he could have the first move and encouraged him to come to her whenever he's ready. He started attacking her. The dojo started evaluating his moves. She could see that his swordsmanship is quite practical for his age. She could sense that it is as if he's been through countless battles before. She attacked and he deflected it. She understood that Belder and the others are no match for him. She could tell that his style is mostly self-taught, but every so often, his swordplay looks similar to what is taught in the academy. It made her curious if someone had taught him. She could tell his swordsmanship is rough, but admitted that he may have the talent, which is why she could say that he's a diamond in the rough. It was about time they wrapped up. She attacked. He was about to strike too. Their swords clashed. They went at it again. She found it strange that he wasn't even faltering and Gray could definitely keep up with her. She just wanted to test his skills a little, but her best was being drawn out, and she questioned the feeling that she was getting. It was fear. Gray made her feel scared. He swung his sword so powerfully that it made her step back. She assumed it was just a wild swing. At that point, she saw his weakness. She took the chance to attack, and decided to end their match there, but she was caught off guard, and was left puzzled. Saria's sword had been cut in half. Consequently, it made Gray shocked too. It was because he felt the same sensation back then, which led him to think that he still has the power, but it came with a drawback. He felt immense pain in his body that made him drop to his knees. Saria worriedly asked him on what's wrong. He realized that his body failed to keep up with the power. His legs were trembling, but he stood up and replied that he's okay. Realizing that he could barely stand, he took a mental note of not using the power carelessly. He thought of telling Saria about it. Saria, on the other hand, was puzzled on why he's staring like that. He ought not to tell her because even if he did, she probably won't believe him. He just decided to make an excuse that he got carried away. Deep inside, though, Saria knew that it was impossible to cut her sword with a dull wooden sword, and she's aware that he knows it too. Seeing how she stared at him, it made him ask what was wrong. Saria understood that he didn't plan to talk about what just happened. She contemplated, then brought up the topic about what he wanted, a recommendation to the academy. He replied that he heard that she could give him one. She replied that she can give him a recommendation to the kingdom's finest educational institution, which is the Royal Academy of Swordsmanship. But she wouldn't recommend that he go there, because she thinks that he's not suited for that place. That made him feel bad. It confirmed his insecurity that he lacked strength, especially when he could hardly do anything except that last moment. Saria told him that there was another place that he should aim for, and that was the World Union Academy, she stated. Gray's eyes widened in shock. What Saria meant was that he shouldn't just be the kingdom's best, he belonged in the world's top institution. That blew his mind. He's well aware that it was the place where the Sword Saint and the others came from. He asked if someone like him can really be accepted there. Surprisingly, she replied that it's impossible. She knew he recognized it himself. His body was far from fit enough to wield a sword. She's aware that if it's the Royal Academy, he might be able to fake it with his skills, but it won't pass in the World Union Academy. She questioned how he'd acquire such skill with his feeble body. He knew she's right, because he's well aware that everyone from that academy is a genuine monster. And with his body like that, he can't even compete. He looked sad about it. Saria saw his expression and asked why he's giving up. She pointed out that there are still 9 months until the entrance exam. He reasoned that it's only 9 months. She agreed that it might not be enough time, but she wanted him to trust her. She asked if he's ready to suffer over the next 9 months. He replied that he didn't want to suffer, but he decided to do it. He entrusted her to take care of him over the next 9 months. She liked our MC's answer. With that, her demeanor changes, which caught Gray off guard, With a devilish grin on her face, she told him that it will be the start of his hell. Days passed as he underwent rigorous training with her. He trained relentlessly. Gray ate both delicious and questionable meals. He sparred with her and continually honed his swordsmanship. Our MC was determined to make it to the entrance exam on time. 8 months later, changes were noticeable. Saria could see that he had grown muscular, and with that, she had nothing else to teach him. She encouraged him to go out there with confidence. He was puzzled because there's still a month until the exam. She explained that taking an exam in a place he's not used to isn't going to be easy, which is why it's best that he gets there early. She gave him money for the trip and for a month's worth of food. He hesitated on taking it. Also, he thinks that going a month early was too soon enough. He takes it as if she's chasing him out of the village. She replied that he's just overthinking it. He brought up the topic about an ogre's nest being found near the area. That surprised her. He added that there are hardly any guards in the village. She tried to play it cool and told him that it had nothing to do with them. She assured him that help will come from the royal capital, so they have nothing to worry about. She urged him to head to the exam without any worries. He could tell that she's lying. He knew that no help would ever come to the village, and right before the village is destroyed, his master would lose her life. In his past life, there was news that she was killed when she went to kill the ogre alone, but he simply replied that he understood what she wanted. He thanked her and informed her that he'll be going. She let out a smirk and wished him well on the exam. Later that night, skeletons were displayed on a tree with sticks piercing through their mouths. Saria showed up in the forest. From the scout's report, she followed the path in the forest and found a trail of blood, and it led right into an eerie den. But she halted when a voice called out to her, asking where she was going. When she looked up, she saw Gray sitting on a branch of a tree. He smiled at her and called her Master. She was surprised to see him. She asked what he was doing there when he's supposed to be on his way to the academy. He asked her the same thing when she said earlier that ogre nests would be taken care of by the army from the royal capital. She told him that the army couldn't come because of an emergency, so she decided to deal with it herself. She assured him that her alone is enough because she already assessed the nest strength from the scout's report. She shared that the boss is an elite ogre and the nest holds around 40 to 50 monsters in total. She admits that the number of minions will be a tad tricky. Thinking about it, Gray knew that it wasn't that strong, but the ogre's real strength lies in its intelligence and leadership. Gray was aware of the risk of being surrounded, and that means it's suicidal to fight alone. And he's certain of one thing. If he lets his master go alone, she won't make it out alive, and the village will be destroyed by the ogres. He had seen that future with his very own eyes. He expressed that he wants to go with her. She refused and insisted that her alone would suffice. He tried to convince her by saying that he doesn't want to miss the chance to gain some real combat experience. Then he asked if she thinks that he's going to get in her way. That made her laugh because she knew that he's well aware that he won't get in her way, especially when she could no longer win against him in a mock battle. She reasoned that nobody knows what may happen in a real fight, especially if it's a monster's nest that suddenly formed. And for a dangerous job like that, it's best to wait until he has a bit more experience in real fights. He understood that she wouldn't budge, so he proposed an idea instead. She got intrigued. He told him that he'll fight with her, knock her out cold, and deal with the ogre by himself. Looking at his stance, it doesn't seem like a joke. The dojo was speechless. She eventually gave up, but stated she had one condition, that no matter what happens, he should come back alive. He assured her that, and also wished her to live. Under the moonlight, they hid behind a boulder while spying on the colony of ogres. The terrain leaves no room for escape. It showed their confidence of building a nest in that kind of location. It also meant Gray and Saria couldn't escape either. And since they were dealing with intelligent monsters, he decided to play it safe. She started to observe the colony carefully, and she didn't see the boss anywhere, so she assumed that it's probably inside the tent. They could only hope to thin their numbers down before the boss comes out. She instructed Gray to take out any enemies he could see on the side, while she takes care of the other side. Gray agreed, and they charged in. One ogre sensed something. Before it could process what it was, Saria was already in its face and slashed its head. The other ogre witnessed the head roll on the ground. It immediately communicated with the other ogres, and in no time, a horde came charging. Meanwhile, on Gray's side, he was cutting down enemies one after another. He moved fast. Same with Saria. It was indeed a bloodbath. Eventually, the two grouped up. A lot of ogre corpses were on the ground. She praised him and even questioned if it was really his first time. But Gray changed the topic and told her to stay sharp. They were just getting started. Internally, Gray felt something was off. The ogres were too weak. If they were really that weak, he knew his master could have handled them alone. That's why he figured the real danger was inside the tent. A pair of red eyes stared out from the pitch-black tent. They locked onto him, and it made him uneasy. Without hesitation, he told her they had to leave. Now. He even urged her to run immediately. Saria asked what was wrong. He looked panicked as he shouted for her to just go. She picked up on his fear, and they started to run. But as they did, something jumped over them. To their shock, an ogre landed in front of them, blocking the way. Saria scoffed when she saw the elite ogre. She said it was an honor that the boss came to them personally, but Gray told her it wasn't the boss. Then another ogre let out a thunderous roar. It was so loud, Saria instinctively covered her ears. Right after that, a swarm of ogres showed up. They were in a frenzy. She was stunned by the sight and asked what was going on. Behind the horde stood a massive ogre. Gray said it was something far stronger than an elite. He called it an ogre general. It was the real boss of the nest. With the elite ogre guarding the exit and a crowd of ogres blocking the front, they were trapped. The ogre general didn't move, but its presence alone was terrifying. Once she heard it was an ogre general, Saria instantly knew they couldn't win this alone. She glanced at the elite ogre, then suggested they take out the one in front of them and try to escape. She launched an attack, but it deflected her strike. She focused and slashed again. She managed to leave a scratch on its shoulder, but to her shock, the wound started healing. Gray told her it was useless. The general's roar boosted the ogre's strength and healing. That's why they felt unusually strong. And now, she was struggling to even take down one of them. Gray kept fighting. He trusted her to cover his back. He said she didn't have to win. He just needed her to buy him time. She got worried and asked what he was planning. He said there was only one option left: to take down that ogre general bastard, and he meant it. An ogre with an axe knocked Gray's sword. Our MC got irritated every time they tried to flank him. The ogre tried to make him drop his sword, then raised its axe to strike. Right now, Gray was focused on taking out every enemy in front of him, but the ogre easily broke his sword. He realized it couldn't handle the power of a boosted ogre. The ogre swung at him again and he jumped just in time. He was glad he had a spare, but he knew it wouldn't last long either. Saria realized his situation and tossed her extra sword to him. He thanked her. Now he had 2 swords, but he knew that still wasn't enough to wipe them all out. So he focused only on the ogre general and the horde between them. He pulled out the second sword. With one quick motion, he cut through the ogres in his way. One of them scratched his cheek as it attacked. He blocked the blow as the ogre tried to push him back with its axe. He clicked his tongue, then pressed harder with his swords. More ogres were coming for him. The ogre general's weapon started to glow. Then came its deafening roar. Gray flinched. He saw the ogres grow even stronger. They charged at him again. He realized the ogre general had figured out his plan. It roared again. Gray now understood. It was undeniably smart. His sword clashed with the ogre's axe. He was pushed back, but he forced himself to just move. He rushed forward, cutting down as many as he could. He knew he didn't have time to deal with all of them. Unexpectedly, an ogre tackled him. It held him firmly while the other one raised its axe. Gray slashed the clinging ogre on its neck. He realized that they were trying out to wear his swords out by throwing themselves at him. While dealing with that, a shadow loomed over him. It was because an ogre leapt and was ready to punch him. He blocked its fist using his sword, but it was powerful that it blasted him away. Gray coughed up blood. His body trembled, he was breathing heavily, and his sword was shattered. He was now down to his last sword. He couldn't believe that he had to take on hordes of ogres and the general with just one sword. And because of his experience before he regressed, he could tell there was no way he could win. He then thought, since that was the case, he told her master to run while the ogres are focused on him. She was amused. But she couldn't do that, Saria replied. While defending attacks, he questioned her if she planned to die for nothing. He assured her that he will run after her. But she told him that it wasn't that. She had a grim expression on her face, until she had this resigned look when she admitted that she couldn't run anymore. Her leg was slashed and was bleeding heavily. Gray turned pale when he saw it. Now, he ran out of options. In his mind, he had gone back in time with one goal: to defeat the liquidators. He swung his sword, all while thinking his life might end right there. His last sword shattered, but he refused to give up. He tried to remember how that power felt back then. He thought about tapping into it again, with one ultimate goal: to defeat his enemies. While ogres readied themselves to attack him, he forced himself to remember. He tried to recall the feeling he had back then. Gray shut his eyes and closed them tight, and as the last piece of his sword flew right in front of him, he opened his eyes and they glowed red. He finally felt it. He swung his black shadow sword, delivering a fatal strike to several ogres. Mist covered part of his face and his blade. Saria was confused. Gray wore a grim look, but when he looked at her, he smiled and told her it was all right. With one swing, he severed several heads. The ogre general's sword began to glow again, but in a split second, it was cut down. Saria noticed it, but while she was distracted, an ogre tried to sneak up on her. She realized the attacks felt weak. She commented that they used to give her a hard time, but now she could slice through them with ease. She said that without the general's boost, they were nothing. It was already deep into the night when they finally defeated the ogres. Gray apologized for breaking her sword. She didn't mind, especially since he saved her life. He handed it back to her. She was about to ask him about the strange power he used when Gray suddenly collapsed. He fell face down to the ground. Saria panicked and called out his name. Gray's consciousness drifted into a dark realm. He asked himself where he was. Everything was pitch black, except for a single door in front of him. He looked around, confused. Black flames then burned through the chains on the door. He recognized it. It was the same power he had tapped into. He wondered if opening that door would give him that power again. The thought made him uneasy. Still, he stepped toward it. But suddenly, he felt a terrifying presence behind him. It made him freeze and step back. His breathing grew fast and shaky. Deep down, he just knew. If he opened that door in his current state, he would definitely die. Then, out of nowhere, a voice said he made the right choice. And just like that, he jolted awake. He was gasping for air, drenched in sweat. Saria was startled. He was finally awake. He asked where he was. Saria told him he was in the village infirmary, and added that he had been unconscious for 5 days. She then admitted that she was scared he might never wake up. When he realized he'd been out for 5 days, he knew he had pushed his body too far. Saria said that pushing himself didn't quite describe what he did, but setting that aside, she checked if he was able to move. Gray tried to move, but he quickly realized he couldn't summon any strength in his right arm. He could move it with effort, but it worried him. What if he couldn't hold a sword anymore? Worse, there was a strange bruise on it. It looked like someone had splattered black ink on his arm. Saria expected that he wouldn't be able to move it well. Gray wondered if she could even see the black mark. He then told her he couldn't put any strength into his dominant arm. Just as she thought, it wouldn't heal properly anytime soon. All the bones in his right arm were shattered. He was shocked. It didn't even hurt. She explained that they used a magic potion to treat it. That stunned him. Magic potions were expensive. She told him not to worry. The village chief was the one who gave it to them. Gray couldn't understand why the chief would give something that valuable to someone like him. She asked what he was talking about, then reminded him he was the village's hero. Gray was clueless. Suddenly, someone burst into the room. It was the village chief. Gray immediately thanked him for the potion. But the chief said they should be the ones thanking him. With strong emotion, the chief said that Gray had fought an ogre general, a monster that even gathered troops from nearby towns couldn't scratch. And that kind of monster had come for their village. He clasped Gray's hand tightly and said, if Gray hadn't killed it, the village would have been wiped out. The chief explained that without him and Saria, there'd be no potion, no infirmary, no survivors. None of them would even be there talking. Gray replied that he was exaggerating, but the village chief insisted. He knew in his heart he wasn't. Gray thought about that. At some point, he agreed with the village chief, because before he regressed, the village was supposed to have been destroyed by the ogre attack. The village chief told him that if he still didn't understand how important his actions were, he'd gladly explain everything in detail. He also heard that Gray was planning to take the academy entrance exam and asked if that was true. Gray's only response was, "Oh." Thoughts raced through his mind. He killed the ogre a week before the exam and had been unconscious for 5 days, leaving him with just 2 days left. He turned pale when he remembered the journey to the academy. It was a 3-day walk. On horseback, it would take a day, but he didn't have the money for that. He immediately asked the chief if he could borrow a horse. The chief had expected that. so he already prepared the best horse in the village for him. With that horse, he'd make it in no time. Saria joked that if he hadn't woken up that day, they would have carried him there while he was still asleep. She then opened the door. The sunlight made him squint. He saw the horse waiting, and a huge crowd around it, holding banners, thanking him and wishing him luck on the exam. Everyone wore bright smiles as they showed their thanks. Many people came to thank him personally. One man stepped forward and handed him a pouch. He asked what it was. The man said it was something the whole village pitched in for. They heard applying to the World Union Academy was expensive. Gray was deeply touched by the gesture. He smiled and thanked them, then said it would be hard to return if he failed the exam. Saria told him not to worry. After all, he's the only one applying to the World Union Academy who's defeated an ogre general. But Gray was still worried about his right arm. She reminded him his left arm still worked fine. He nodded. Saria said that was more than enough, and he didn't need to use that power either. He argued that the exam might not be that easy. Passing it with just one arm didn't sound simple. Saria reassured him. She said he'd definitely stand out, and the examiners would recognize his strength. She was confident. With full belief, she told him, he will pass. He thanked her, and said that with her saying it like that, he had no choice but to pass. In his past life, the village had been destroyed, but now, it was still standing. Gray realized the world wasn't the same anymore, and that meant the future could change. All of it, thanks to his power. And now, he was set to go. Eventually, he made it in time. He even thanked the horse for getting him there. He looked straight ahead and saw a city surrounded by a lake. He finally arrived at the World Union Academy. At the arena, the host announced that they would begin handing out exam tickets. Until the process was done, all examinees were to stay inside the central arena. There were a lot of people, but only 20 would pass. Someone mentioned that the number of successful candidates changes every year. Sometimes 50 make it, other times only one. The host then called Professor Ariel to the front. She walked in and began distributing the exam tickets right away. She instructed the examinees to take the paper that would appear before them. She then snapped her fingers. A golden light filled the arena. A paper appeared in front of each examinee. Gray was examinee number 513 under the fencing course. He noticed everyone else had theirs too. She explained they would only see their number and course, and reassured them that this was how it's done every year. She gave a small grin, then told them that the World Union Academy does not judge based on age, gender, nationality, or status. That even included their names. None of those things mattered to the Academy, she added. Only those who passed the exam and earned the right to cross the bridge would be asked for their name, and even then, they could give a fake one if they wanted. Gray was confused. Even though he left his sword at the inn, his paper still said he was in the fencing course. It made him curious about what kind of system they were using. Then, Professor Ariel explained, they assigned the courses based on appearance. She said if she got anyone's course wrong, they should raise their hand. The examinees were stunned. They couldn't believe she sorted them just by looking, especially with so many people there. Some of them guessed she had already looked them up. Others thought maybe she used some kind of mind-reading magic. But after a while, no one raised their hand. So, she concluded that no one had been misassigned. Next, she announced their exam schedules. She told everyone to check their tickets. Gray's paper said he was scheduled on the first day, at 11 a.m. He didn't like it. He was hoping for a little more time to let his arm recover. Professor Ariel reminded them it was a one-shot practical exam. If they were late, they'd be disqualified. No exceptions, no reschedules. Gray held his arm, thinking he still couldn't use much strength. He silently prayed it would get a bit better by tomorrow. The next day arrived. He was in a pinch because it didn't heal at all. He had no choice but to take the exam with his arm still that way. He was called to the entrance of the arena. He took a deep breath and reminded himself not to be pessimistic about it. He evaluated that his left arm was still functional, and he can move his right to an extent. He used the time he had left to watch the examiner's moves, and to find an opening. The examiner told the examinee to make the move first. The examinee charged at the examiner. His swings were heavy, but the examiner just sidestepped to evade it. The examinee yelled that he's not done yet. He grips his sword with both of his hands, and swung it. The examiner blocked it using just one hand. Seeing that happen, the examinee's spirit got crushed. The professor then charged at him, and blasted him away with just one swing. The guy fell on his back, and the examiner concluded his exam. He was instructed to retrieve his weapon and exit the venue. Seeing that, a small smile formed in Gray's face. He already knew it. He was totally done. There was no way in hell he could win. Not long after, the examiner called his number. As he walked toward him, he couldn't believe he had to fight someone who had taken down a man twice his size using only one arm. Gray was instructed to make the first move. He felt like he didn't have a chance, but he decided to do whatever he could. He charged forward. He recalled what Saria had told him, that a sword isn't swung with just arms, but he needed to channel his power generated by his entire body through his arms. Even if his right arm is powerless, he thought of driving the force through his other muscles. He swung his sword and the examiner ducked to evade it. Gray was feeling nervous since he can't fight the way he usually does. He thought that if swinging a sword without arm strength was that easy, no one would bother training their body in the first place. The examiner counterattacked. That's when Gray got confused. Because the instructor's sword was kind of slow, he was able to block it. He could tell that the examiner had insane power, but his speed and technique don't even come close to his master's. He believes that if he relies on the swordsmanship he learned from her, he might be able to make up for the difference in arm strength. Gray's eyes turned sharp and he thought, if that was the case, he moved accordingly, and became certain that the examiner was slow, and wasn't nearly as strong as he thought. He recalled his master's words, that he'd definitely pass. Their swords clashed, and he was able to overpower the examiner. It's when he started having faith that he could do it. Their sword fight continued. Although Gray had seen the examiner's swordsmanship, he charged at him, and the professor evaded, which led Gray to think that the difference in power is too great that he can't break his form. It made him realize that it wasn't easy to win with just one hand, after all. With that said, as they continued to spar, the examiner's movements were becoming rougher. While Gray had a risky move in mind, he found the right timing, and baited him to come to him. The examiner attacked, and that's what he wanted, for him to make a wide-open swing. He shifted his weight to his right foot, knowing it would leave an opening. He also knew most opponents would go for a big, obvious swing. Unexpectedly, Gray was already behind the examiner. The examiner was caught off guard. Our MC knew that no matter how great the difference in power is, if he could get behind, then he'd be able to defeat him. But they were suddenly ordered to halt. The tip of his sword was only an inch away from the examiner's back. Gray wondered if the match was really over. He thought it's a bit early to stop there. The other examiner announced that the time limit for him has been reached. His eyes widened as the result was announced. It was a draw. Gray was sure he wouldn't make it. His grip on the sword loosened, as if his body had simply given up. He left the arena feeling down because he had given his all to pass. He also knew that if he can't win against the examiner, things will be difficult for him. He expects his arm to heal next year, so he'll take the exam again. Before he left, he glanced at it one last time and expressed a thank you. 1 week later, in the World Union Academy Meeting Room 53, the head of the academy asked the professors their thoughts on the candidates now that they have finished all their exams. One of them expressed that he's exhausted. An older professor stated that the method of everyone observing together is rather inefficient and suggested to divide the workload next year. Another professor defended that they can't afford to overlook a talent simply for the sake of making things easier for themselves. The head sighed and pointed out that he asked to hear their thoughts on the examinees and not on the system. He started with the examinees from the swordsmanship course. He asked who passed. They watched the screens, and one of the professors stated that, as always, those who beat the examiners passed, and the rest will be based on the quality they showed and how they held out during the 15-minute time limit. He asked the other swordsmanship course instructors what they thought. One professor replied that other than those who beat the examiner, the candidates number 5,217, 753 stood out. The other person suggested that they keep it at that, since even if others joined, they wouldn't be able to keep up in class. The professor agreed and asked if anyone thinks otherwise. The meeting went on. Eventually, the head concluded that they had confirmed the successful candidates for the swordsmanship course, but then someone asked about candidate number 513. The head glanced at the speaker. It was Professor Ariel. She asked them what they think about candidate 513. They all watched the screen. One professor called 513 a little guy. When they watched it, it looked like he's going to win, but if he relied on setting up traps just to beat the examiner, things would be difficult for him. They observed that the technique was good, but his strength was lacking, and it felt like he was outmatched from the start. The brown-haired professor with a mustache expressed that he's not good. They all agreed. Professor Ariel was speechless. She couldn't believe that so many have watched and yet not a single one of them noticed. She thinks that if everyone's blind, then having everyone to observe together is a waste. The next day, Gray was holding his exam ticket. The results for the swordsmanship course will finally be announced. Only 6 people passed. Everyone waited nervously. The first to be called was candidate number 5. As their number was called, their exam ticket burned. Then came candidate 217. Next were numbers 432 and 615. Then 753 and 925. That was it. Gray looked crushed when his number wasn't called. The successful candidates were told to cross the bridge and finish enrollment by the end of the day. Gray was downcast while others around him cheered for the passers. He wore a heartbroken look after failing. Then came another announcement: the Divine Eye Special Admission. Just a few seconds later, Gray's number was called, and his exam ticket burned in blue flames. Everyone around him was shocked. Gray stood frozen, completely confused. People in the crowd started sneering. It was Gray's first time hearing about this special admission. Some said the Academy must have cheated. They claimed the World Union Academy had sunk to a new low. Gray overheard them. He was confused since he had no connections. He wondered if his master did something, but he hadn't heard anything. An old man scolded the crowd for talking like that about the Divine Eye admission. He said it was a prestigious category that produced heroes for centuries. The crowd didn't buy it. They said it was only respected long ago. They pointed out recent Divine Eye picks, Amy White, Bella Albright, Leek Muller, and Jacob Bloomfield, and called them failures. Even the current candidates had heard the stories, but Gray knew better. Those 3 were part of the main force that fought against the Liquidator. Now, his name stood beside theirs. An announcement was made in the academy that the entrance ceremony would begin in 30 minutes. Once the students finished changing, they were asked to gather in the plaza in front of the main office. Their uniform had a black path with the academy's symbol engraved on it. Our MC looked dashing. Some students arrived early at the plaza, but they weren't sure if it was the right place since nothing was set up yet. A man came running toward them and apologized for the delay, saying there was a mix-up. He asked the students to step back a little so he could place the stairs in that spot. The students moved and asked if where they were standing was okay. The man said it was perfect. Then he knelt down. The students were confused. He touched the ground, and a large magic circle appeared. The ground started to shift. The students' jaws dropped. They were shocked to see a full structure rise right in front of them. The man apologized again for the delay and told them they could sit wherever they liked. The students were clearly amazed. They realized it was teleportation magic, but couldn't believe something that big could be teleported. Gray sat down, thinking the school probably wanted the ceremony to be held in a place where the building could be seen. To him, it felt like an extravagant use of teleportation magic. He definitely looked excited, after realizing how powerful the World Union Academy was. The students noticed there were too many seats. Only 30 students were accepted, so it seemed unnecessary to have that many. The girl she was talking to was surprised she didn't know why. She apologized, explaining that, aside from sword training, she hadn't studied much else. The girl offered to explain. She said that, as the name suggests, the academy gathers top students from around the world. Then she pointed at something in the sky. The other girl was shocked to see aircraft and dragons flying above. She asked what those were. Gray was surprised to see the magic airship, Strato Queen. He had boarded it once before when he joined the Liquidator Subjugation Squad. It was said to be one of the biggest airships in the world. He couldn't believe they used it just for an entrance ceremony. The World Union Academy definitely exceeded all of Gray's expectations. The airship landed, and the students got off. Now, everyone was present. The entrance ceremony could begin. Eventually, the headmaster's speech had ended. Gray looked bored. In his mind, the entrance ceremony isn't different from a normal one. The next part of the program is the greetings from the top students of each course. Leonhardt, the top student of the swordsmanship course, was called in front. While he got up from his seat and made his way on the stage, the students gossiped about him. They heard that he defeated the examiner in an instant during the entrance exam. Some even said that he's as good as any of the professors when it comes to swordsmanship. This student is Leonhard Apius. Gray watched him. Before he reaches the mic, he confirms with the heads if he's allowed to speak freely. They replied yes, and he thanked them. Then he stated that he had one complaint that he'd like to make to the academy. Before he continued on that, he greeted his fellow students, and all of those who were admitted in the academy through a proper way. He stated that it's an honor to be admitted to the academy with the rest of them. He told them that they should graduate as individuals capable of making meaningful contributions to the world, so he encouraged them to work together. He added that he was looking forward to the days when they can aim high together as students of the prestigious World Union Academy, but he expressed that there's among them those who don't deserve to be there. He asked Professor Ariel if he's correct. It caught her off guard. She stated that all the students there passed the rigorous exams, and though they may not be as strong as him, she doesn't think that it's a wise idea to exclude them. Then she asked him why he's asking her that. Leonhardt glared at her while saying that he's not talking about those who have been admitted by passing the exams properly. He stated that what he meant was the students she backdoored into the Divine Eye special admission. Then he dared the student who was specially admitted to show himself and ordered him to return his uniform and leave the academy. Tension filled the air. Gray couldn't understand why he's so hostile. Then he recalled that Leonhardt was sitting right next to him. He was relieved that he didn't know his face. He was thinking that he won't get caught up in it if he doesn't step forward. Professor Ariel acknowledged that the students for that year are quite lively. Leonhardt felt like no one was taking him seriously. He called her out and told her to stop letting students in through the back door. She didn't say much at first. Then, in the blink of an eye, she leaned in and whispered in his ear, asking if he really thought he was stronger than that kid. Her move was unexpected, that it shocked the whole arena. Leonhardt was caught off guard. He gritted his teeth. He said yes, then asked if she was trying to prove him wrong. Professor Ariel liked his confidence and suggested a bet. That caught his interest. She bet both her job and the kid's admission. Gray was confused by everything happening. Leonhardt turned to Professor Ariel and asked if she was trying to make him fight the special admission kid. Professor Ariel calmly replied that she'd never do something so boring. She added that if Gray went all out, Leonhardt would be dead. As a responsible teacher, she said she'd never put their lives in danger. Leonhardt's veins popped in anger. He felt insulted, but she simply said she was stating facts. Instead, she suggested a safer option, a bet involving monsters. She said Leonhardt was better at fighting monsters than people anyway. He glared at her but admitted that she knew him well. He asked what the actual bet was. She explained it simply. Each of them would fight a monster she picked. The monsters would get stronger with each round. Whoever fails to defeat their monster first loses. The stakes? If Gray lost, Professor Ariel would retire and the special admission students would be expelled. But if Leonhardt lost, he'd have to do whatever she told him. Then she asked if he was in. Leonhardt wanted to know what kind of monsters they'd be facing. He was confident in his skills, but he didn't want to get caught up in anything weird. After thinking for a moment, she revealed the first target, an ogre general. Then she teasingly asked if it was too easy for him. The whole class was stunned, but Gray didn't react. Instead, he was curious why she chose that monster. Leonhardt, on the other hand, was furious. He shouted that an ogre general wasn't something a person could defeat alone. Professor Ariel clarified that they didn't have to do it right away. They'd be given a full year. Leonhardt snapped. If someone could solo a disaster-level monster in just a year, people wouldn't be suffering in the first place. He yelled at her to pick something more realistic. Trying to catch his breath, he paused, and then realized her true plan. He believed she was purposely choosing something impossible just so there wouldn't be a clear winner, but with confidence, he declared he wasn't going to play along. Ariel smirked and added one last condition. If the match ended in a draw, then Leonhardt would be considered the winner. Basically, if Gray failed to defeat the ogre general, she would be fired, and all the special students would be expelled. She asked him what he thought about that. He looked at her like she was crazy. He couldn't shake the feeling that the bet was already stacked against him. She took his silence as agreement. Just to be clear, he said it better not be a weakened ogre general or anything like that. She calmly replied, "Of course." Then, with a flick of her hand, a feather pen appeared out of thin air. She told him that the terms were already written in a magic contract, and he could sign it if he had no objections. He read the contract, and chose to go through with it. Still, he had to ask, did she really believe that the kid could win? Her answer was vague. She said, "Who knows?" Then she quietly returned to her seat. The other professors whispered among themselves, wondering what was wrong with her. Some thought she was just using the bet as an excuse to retire. It wasn't too far-fetched. She was past her prime, after all. Gray had no choice now. The bet was official, but something bugged him. Why did she include the one he defeated before enrollment when she said the time frame was a full year? She then watched our MC in silence. Gray realized the bet was already sealed the moment it started. As he stared at her, she put a finger to her lips, telling him to stay quiet. That's when Gray knew. She played dirty. Eventually, the opening ceremony ended, and everyone went to their assigned classes. The first subject was basic magic. It was surprising to some that the lecture started right away on day one, but as students of the academy, they had to understand every single day mattered. The professor began the lesson by teaching how to use magic. It was the most basic topic. He explained that the body holds a hidden energy called ether, by guiding it through the body's magic circuits. He continued writing and explaining on the board. Gray was in that class. At first, he was worried he might not keep up, but it turned out he already knew this lesson from boot camp. So far, so good. But there was one big problem. Out of all the possible classes, he ended up in the same one as Leonhardt. He silently prayed Leonhardt wouldn't find out that he was the Divine Eye special admissions student. The professor noticed Gray looking uninterested. He scolded him for already looking away just 5 minutes into the lecture. Gray was shocked he got caught with just a glance, even though he was seated all the way in the back. He quickly apologized. The professor challenged him. If he looked that confident, why not prove it in front of the class? He even taunted him by expecting him to be able to use basic magic. Gray politely explained that since they were in the swordsmanship course, he thought it was okay if they couldn't use magic. The professor replied that even if you mainly use a sword in combat, it's still important to understand the basics of magic, at the very least to coordinate with mages. Knowing basic spells and understanding how they feel is essential. Gray didn't expect the professor to give the same explanation as the one from boot camp. He wondered if the spell they'd be learning would also be the same. So, he asked if they were going to learn Ether Bullet. The professor raised an eyebrow and asked if he could already use it. Gray said yes. He felt relieved. At least the painful boot camp hadn't been a waste. Seeing a chance, the professor decided to set up a match. He knew Leonhardt, whom he called Leon, could also use Ether Bullet. Leonhardt confirmed it. He added that even before entering the academy, he had trained in both swordsmanship and magic, which, in his opinion, made it risky for another student to fight him seriously. But the professor wasn't worried. He said that even if there's a big difference in skill, they were just using ether bullets. It's not like anyone would die. And he didn't plan on asking Leonhardt to hold back either. Then, the professor dropped a bomb. He revealed that Gray was the Divine Eye student for the year. Everyone turned to stare at Gray. He knew he was in trouble now. The professor grinned like a devil as he exposed everything. Leonhardt responded coldly. He said he would show Gray how things really worked, and what kind of place the academy truly was. Leonhardt glared at Gray and told him to step forward. They stood face to face. The professor explained that once he gave the signal, they would fire their ether bullets at each other. Gray had only trained in magic for a few days during boot camp, and even though the professor said it wouldn't be fatal, he knew he probably wouldn't walk away without getting hurt. The professor gave the signal to start. Leonhardt was set on proving how much stronger he was. Gray had no choice. He decided to just go for it. Leonhardt released a small baby blue orb of light, but when Gray cast his spell, a large glowing blue orb formed in front of him. The next moment left everyone stunned, their faces frozen. Even our MC was in disbelief. Gray's ether bullet overpowered Leonhardt's. It made Leonhardt shriek. The professor immediately intervened and formed a barrier in front of Leonhardt to protect him. He was relieved to have saved him. But to their surprise, the barrier broke. It completely shattered and blasted Leonhardt away. It emitted a powerful gust of wind and a blinding light. Other students got affected by it. Leonhardt let out a loud scream as he crashed to the floor. The professor rushed to his side and asked if he was okay. Leonhardt stood up and said he was fine. The professor let out a sigh of relief. Then he looked at Gray. He realized that if the barrier hadn't weakened the impact, Leonhardt could have died. And even more shocking, none of the professors could produce an ether bullet that strong. He turned to Gray and asked, "What did you just do?" Gray was confused. Leonhardt's ether bullet felt so weak, it didn't even seem like the same spell. That made him wonder. Was the ether bullet he learned during his time in the subjugation squad different from the one taught at the academy? He asked if maybe he had used the wrong spell. The professor said no. It was definitely an ether bullet. But he added that the quality of Gray's was different. It wasn't made from regular ether, it was super compressed ether. The other students had never even heard of that before. The professor admitted it was a kind of power even they struggled to control. Yet somehow, Gray not only produced it, he shaped it into a spell. He said there was no one else in the entire academy who could pull that off. The students started whispering. It was the first time they'd seen an ether bullet that powerful. Some of them now believed that the Divine Eye admission existed for this exact reason. Others said Gray should have been placed in the magic course from the beginning instead of being admitted as a special case. But in Gray's mind, something didn't feel right. All the spells he learned at the Subjugation Squad boot camp were like that. And even among his group, he wasn't considered particularly talented. He asked the professor if he was just joking, because with enough practice, anyone should be able to do something like that. The professor burst out laughing. Gray was confused, especially when the professor laughed even louder. Then, out of nowhere, the professor grabbed him by the shoulders, stepped into his personal space, and told him to transfer to the magic course. He even offered to personally vouch for him. According to him, Gray was more gifted in magic than in swordsmanship. Gray politely declined, saying he had always been told he wasn't good at magic. The professor looked at him like that was the funniest joke ever. He couldn't believe Gray, someone who understood the ether compression technique well enough to create supercompressed ether, thought he lacked talent. He called Gray a once-in-a-generation genius, someone even the academy would call a prodigy. He added that whoever told him he had no magical talent clearly didn't know what they were talking about. Then he asked again, was Gray really sure he didn't want to switch to the magic course? The professor was known for rarely handing out compliments, so the students were stunned. They couldn't believe he was praising someone this much. He kept pressuring Gray, saying that if someone like him didn't study magic, it would be a loss for the world, and even called it a crime against magic itself. Gray let out a nervous laugh. Then, something clicked. He suddenly remembered where he had actually heard about the ether compression technique before. In his previous life back at boot camp, someone once explained that in the old days, people didn't even know that Oad, also called life force, existed. Because of that, casting proper magic was incredibly hard. They had to keep compressing ether inside their bodies and hope that a bit of it would mix with Odd by chance, just to create a usable spell. A woman with baby blue hair and golden eyes had called that process laughable. Now, in the present, Gray asked the professor if he had ever heard of Odd. The professor looked confused. That reaction confirmed it. This world still didn't know about its existence. Gray realized something big. What he had learned in the subjugation squad was knowledge from the future, and he knew he had to be careful about who he told. The professor brought the topic back and asked again if he was willing to transfer to the magic course. Gray gave a proper bow and apologized. He explained that he loved swords. As grateful as he was for the offer, he had to decline. The professor accepted his decision, but he told Gray that if he ever changed his mind, he was welcome to come to him, any time. Gray thanked him sincerely. Then the professor told him to go back to his seat. He also added that from now on, he wouldn't scold Gray for looking bored in class or even for leaving early, because he knew this lecture was far too basic for someone like Gray. The other students were impressed. They couldn't believe that Professor Carlos thought so highly of Gray. Meanwhile, Leonhardt watched him closely. He clutched his chest. His cheeks turned slightly pink as he looked at Gray with admiration. He even called him Lord Gray. Gray felt a chill run down his spine. It was honestly a little creepy. Later that day, Gray received a letter from Professor Ariel asking him to come to her office after class. The sudden summons caught him off guard. He wondered if it had something to do with Professor Carlos. He guessed she might also be planning to recommend he switch to the magic course. When he reached her office, he stood in front of the door. Before he could knock, Professor Ariel called out from inside, saying it wasn't locked. He walked in. But then, he was suddenly attacked. He quickly drew his sword and blocked the attack with ease. The girl who struck at him was stunned. Gray realized he reacted purely on instinct, but he still wanted to know, why did she attack him? Then he got a good look at her face, and was shocked. She looked familiar, like someone he had seen before. Someone from across the table said that he did great. It was Professor Ariel, and Gray had just proven that her eyes were right. The man on the side asked if Bella wasn't holding back. He had to confirm if she had received an instruction from Ariel to go easy. Her movements were flawless, but to have her sword be knocked out of her hand so easily was unnatural. Hearing her name, Gray had confirmed that she really was Bella Albright. She was the Grand Sorceress. Ariel couldn't believe that those two men were seriously saying those things. She suggested that if they couldn't tell if Bella was holding back or not, they should quit as a professor. The professor replied that they were just joking. Since he lost, He gave her the coins. Gray had to ask what they were doing. Ariel replied that they were betting on whether he can fend off Bella's surprise attack or not. And thanks to him, she made a good amount of money. Then she threw him his share. His jaw dropped upon seeing the gold coin. It was worth a fortune. And the other professor started saying that it was just as she said. They noticed that from that exchange earlier, Gray deliberately didn't use his dormant arm. Almost as if he was trying to protect his immobile arm. One professor speculated if it was from an injury. The other thinks that rather than an apparent physical injury to the muscles, it was more like a deeper kind of wound. The professor agreed that a simple injury wouldn't cause that. Gray couldn't believe that they could tell it just from looking. The professors replied that if they couldn't tell that much, they wouldn't be professors in the academy. Though, Professor Ariel was already aware about it during the exam. Professor Ariel told them to leave now that they understand. She told them that he's her student and she won't give him up. The professors admit that Gray has potential. But, if the wound doesn't heal, it still means that he failed to meet the academy's admission standards. Before they left, they told him to keep that in mind. And they were gone. Now that the nuisances were out of the way, Professor Ariel brought up the topic about magic. They had a conversation over tea. She heard that he used a super compressed ether in Professor Carlos's class. He didn't expect that she already knew. She replied that he came to her office and asked her to hand Gray over to the magic course. Obviously, she declined, because to her, he's more suited to wield the sword than magic. Our MC didn't expect to hear that from her. She added that he doesn't look like he's good at magic compression, and he didn't show signs of having practiced it. He was overwhelmed that she simply knew by looking. Because of that, he decided not to lie. And it was just as she said. She asked what kind of trick he used. She promised not to divulge it to anyone, and will give him a reward. She really needs to know for Bella's sake. He was almost called the sorceress. Professor Ariel explained that Bella was a genius when it comes to magic theory. She's far from the best at wielding it. For some reason, she just can't use the ether compression technique well. That's why she can't create super compressed ether. Gray did hear before that Bella was a late bloomer. Then Professor Ariel continued to say that from what she heard from Professor Carlo, when Gray used super compressed ether, he didn't look like he compressed ether at all. So if there's a way to use super compressed ether without actually compressing ether, then Bella won't have to be sent to Professor Varian. Gray recognized that name. He asked if she meant Professor Varian Bradley. She realized that he knew him. Well, it's impossible not to know him because he's extremely infamous. After all, he has conducted countless experiments on humans, murdering many in the process. On top of that, he has caused magic disasters that resulted in the death of tens of thousands of people. He is history's worst magic criminal. Gray was surprised that he still hadn't been caught in that period. Professor Ariel shared that if Bella can't create super compressed ether by the end of the year, she'll be sent to him and will undergo surgery. He was surprised to hear that because it was such a bad idea. Professor Ariel agreed. Though the surgery was under the pretense of enhancing her magic abilities, it's actually human experimentation. It hasn't been made public, but rumor has it that because of him, some people have died, while others were left broken. Bella spoke that it was dangerous and scary, but she will be expelled by the end of the year if she can't use super compressed ether. Professor Ariel expressed that she honestly wished she'd quit the academy than have that man mess with her body. The magic that Gray knew was a knowledge that did not yet exist at that time. If he tells them, he might end up changing the course of history. He saw Bella trembling, and it made him recall his past encounter with the Liquidator and how helpless he felt. He realized that there's not a reason to share when that hellhole people call the future is much better off changed. He replied that he understood and promised to teach her on how to use super compressed ether at dusk in the arena. He wrote some notes on the board. It was everything he knew about magic, and he reminded them of their promise of not telling anyone what he just shared. Professor Ariel assured him of that. They even signed a magic contract, and if they broke it, they'll die. He asked them what they thought of what he just shared. Professor Ariel admitted that just learning about OD blew her mind, but the knowledge of magic he revealed was beyond that. Bella replied that it was brief yet well organized. To her, it felt like she was listening to a magic class from hundreds of years into the future. And just hearing his explanation has definitely advanced the history of magic by 100 years. In his head, he answered that it was from her lecture 10 years from then, but he understood that it sounded like it was advanced by 100 years to a person in that era. Professor Ariel expressed that there was a lot of information that she couldn't judge properly. She asked Bella if she thinks that what he said was true. She replied that there's a good chance that the theory was correct and none of it contradicts the current magic theory. Plus, the quickest way to find out was to test it. That is why they were there. If everything Gray said was true, the spell should work. She gave them the copy. He read it and was confused. She released a light on her staff to demonstrate her full strength based on the theory. If he remembered correctly, Bella's full strength was said to be capable of burning down an entire city. Moreover, she was said to be unable to properly control her powerful magic output. Before he could finish the thought, her power expanded. Even Bella was confused. And the next thing they knew, her power erupted. The concentrated magic bursted to heaven. No one had ever expected her to release this much mana. It was such an overwhelming power. If she hadn't taken control of the magic a split second earlier, he would have died. She did literally save his life. Meanwhile, Bella was happy that she had done it. Plus, she was able to control it too. She formed a dragon with her magic and found it so fun, but she was depleted of ether and passed out. Gray panicked, but Professor Ariel told him to relax. Bella simply fell asleep because she ran out of her ether. She told him to let her rest. Gray was relieved. Professor Ariel couldn't help but express that she was marvelous. She put together magic on that scale in such a short amount of time. Even when asleep, Bella replied that it wasn't her who was amazing, it was the theory. Because of it, she can easily create a super compressed ether. In Gray's head, he responded that it was her theory though. Professor Ariel was relieved that Bella no longer needs surgery now that she can create a super compressed ether. She planned to personally Bradley to call it off. She was glad about that, but more especially that Bella didn't lose her magic control. Gray asked about it. She explained that even if Varian surgery can increase one's magical output, it comes at the expense of control. Exactly how it works is a secret, but it seems to be a surgery that forcibly breaks one's limiter. It made Gray think that the reason the sorceress in the past world couldn't control her powerful magic was because of that surgery. Professor Ariel pointed out that it was thanks to Gray that Bella could now use a super compressed ether. With that, the contract had been fulfilled. And it was turned to fulfill her part of the contract, and the first thing on her list was to use magic on his arm. When she released her magic, magical butterflies came out too. She touched his hand and the butterflies flew around them. The magic became stronger. And when she was done, she asked how he felt. He tried clenching his hand, and to his surprise, he could move it. He thanked her for it. He was puzzled because not even a magic healing potion could cure it. She told him not to compare her nerves-restoring magic with the average magic healing potions. Then she asked if he could move his hand the way it used to. She suggested he swings a sword to find out. Our boy took a step away from her and swung a sword. He was confused at first, so he kept swinging. He felt strange. It didn't feel like it moved as well as it used to. She told him that she has repaired his nerves, but her magic can't heal the wounds in his soul. He asked about it. She emphasized that he heard her right. Then she told him that the recent magic knowledge hasn't proven the existence of one's soul yet, but she believes it does. After all, she can see it with her eye. She can see that his soul was slowly healing. It will heal naturally as long as he doesn't overexert himself. He thought about it and asked if he should refrain from practicing his swords. She told him that it's fine to exercise as he normally would. She was actually curious what kind of swordsmanship could harm one's soul like that. He didn't know what to say. Then she stated that there's already an example of swordsmanship that uses one's soul to move the sword. She's talking about Amy White. She knew he already knew her. Gray was confused why she's mentioning the Sword Saint then. And during that era, they haven't even met. Because of his silence, Professor Ariel asked if she was wrong. She told him that the way he wields his sword gives her the impression that he learned it from Amy. And when she thought about it again, she noticed the slight difference. It made her think that the person he learned swordsmanship from must have been more skilled than Amy. She told him to give it a few more years, and Amy would just be as skilled as his master. Gray was astonished that she could even think that far. He replied that he learned his swordsmanship at a dojo in his hometown. At this point, he had to change the topic because if he let this conversation continue, he might end up spilling everything. So he asked if it was possible for one's soul to be damaged because of swordsmanship. She replied no. At the very least, not with any swordsmanship. Simply put, there was no way that something ordinary could defeat an ogre general with just one slash. Not to mention cutting down the surrounding ogres and trees too. Gray realized that she already knew. Of course she would. And thanks to him, she already practically won the bet. She admitted that she saw some of the remaining scenes left and they were magnificent. Not even the most sophisticated cleaving magic could have done that. It made her conclude that he used the mysterious power within him. He asked him if she could see it with her eye. She confidently replied yes. She could see the power leaking through the chain door. It made him recall the door that he saw. It's not just something one can figure out by guessing, so he was convinced that she could really see it. Then she shared that she had seen power similar to his, though she doesn't think they're the same things, just a similar vibe. He asked if there were others with powers similar to his. She replied yes, but also admitted that she was uncertain if they're humans or not. Then she told him that they were called the Liquidators, and seeing his expression, she could tell he had heard of them. He was bewildered why that name was being mentioned in that period of time. Professor Ariel realized that he knew of it. In all honesty, she didn't think it was that well known. She stated that since Gray knew about a future-looking kind of magic theory, it wasn't that surprising. He just laughed it off while thinking that it really was knowledge from the future, but no one realized it yet. She asked him how much he knew about the Liquidator. He replied that he only knew that he's an extremely dangerous threat to humanity, and that he has to be stopped before he appears. If that's impossible, then he must be destroyed no matter what it takes. She replied that he was a bit extreme, though she agrees that he's dangerous. But even so, Varian was intent on continuing his experiments. Gray asked how Professor Varian was related to it. She was confused why he asked. Then she revealed that the Liquidator was the very being that he was trying to summon. That was news to him. He didn't know that the Liquidator was man-made. But when he thought about the Academy last time, they acted as if they knew exactly where the Liquidator would appear. Then he realized it. He was alarmed. That the Academy was involved in summoning all along. He yelled that the experiment had to be stopped immediately, to which Professor Ariel agreed. But unfortunately, the one running it was a professor like her, so she doesn't have the authority to shut him or his experiment down. She did push the higher-ups to cancel it, but they wouldn't listen. Gray questioned who exactly were those higher-ups. She doesn't have the authority to tell him that either. She summed up that unless the orders came from above, no one can force the experiment to stop. He was disappointed that not even a name was given. He realized that the Academy's leadership was more tangled than he thought, but if that person was a criminal, then it changes things. In the last world, Varian's illegal experiments killed tens of thousands, and he even knew where he carried them out. He revealed that he knew where Varian conducted the illegal experiment, and he thought of catching him red-handed. But Professor Ariel told him that it won't work either. He asked why. She explained that entering an Academy professor's research facility without permission was a serious crime on its own. And if they can't produce hard evidence, they would be the ones getting locked up. It made her ask if he has proof of his crimes. He became silent. She continued to say that if not, then they had to put off the conversation for the time being. He realized that she knew it was dangerous and her hands were tied. He simply replied that he understood her. Then she changed the subject into talking about his power. She asked if he wanted to learn how to control it. It caught his attention. He asked if she could really do that. She replied that there's a professor in the Academy who's very good at dealing with unknown forces. The name was Heathcote Longfellow. He knew it was the very same person who trained the Sword Saint herself. She expected it to catch his interest, so she planned to arrange for him to start private training with him tomorrow. He was very happy with that. The very reason he came to the Academy was to master the power. He didn't expect to find a lead that fast. The next day, Heathcote Longfellow attacked him. He couldn't believe that he had been receiving private lessons from Heathcote Longfellow himself, but he's confused why they're just running like that. They were in the middle of the forest. Even if Heathcote was ahead of him, he could tell Gray's mind was wandering. He yelled at him that if he had room for stray thoughts, then he should just pick up the pace. He instructed him to run until his body was at its absolute limit. He yelled for him to listen, well then he lectured him that only once he burned away every drop of his physical strength will his soul's power awaken. And as long as he got even a scrap of stamina left, they won't touch swords. He replied, "Yes, sir." He had faith that since it was Heathcote's training, it must mean something. But he also didn't like that while he's out there running laps, Varian's carrying out his experiments to summon the Arbiter. They continued running, while he questions himself if he should really be doing that at that moment. Later that day, he reported to Professor Ariel. She was aware that it had been a week of training already. She asked how it was. He replied that it was mostly running and a bit of sword drills at the very end. He admits that he felt stronger, though. She laughed as she commented that it sounds exactly like him. While they were conversing, someone knocked on the door. Then that person handed Professor Ariel a letter. She read the letter, and afterwards she made a terrifying expression. He asked her what was wrong. She gave him the letter. And when he read it, he also had the same displeased expression. The letter to Professor Ariel was about Bella, who had succeeded in super-compressed ether, and it appeared that she had gained a power closely resembling it. However, upon examination, it was clear that she had not actually compressed it. Therefore, her new ability cannot be recognized as super-compressed ether. So their contract remains valid, and the surgery would be processed as scheduled. It was from Varian Bradley. Gray was furious. He yelled, "This is insanity." Professor Ariel could tell Varian was determined to force her into surgery even if she doesn't need it anymore. He asked if Bella couldn't refuse. She replied that, unfortunately, the contract was airtight. Unless Varian himself voids it, Bella's only choices were expulsion or the operation. Gray couldn't accept that. She expressed that she needed his help. She wanted to know where Varian's lab was, because if they exposed him as a criminal, the contract would be null and void. He was caught off guard, but in a few seconds, he smiled. Then he reminded her what she said. It was dangerous without proof. She replied that they'll find evidence. She placed her faith on him. Thinking about it, she admits that she could have done that already from the start because her eyes had told her that he was telling the truth the entire time. It just took her long to admit that. She demanded him to show her the way, and together, they would bring Varian's crimes to light. Gray informed Professor Ariel that Varian's laboratory was located in the mountains near the village of Torwell. She remembered him having an Academy-authorized laboratory there. He couldn't believe that he's doing illegal experiments in an authorized lab. She told him that there's no better place to conduct illegal experiments except there. No one would bat an eyelid even if he stays there for long. On top of that, no professor of the Academy would interfere with another's lab. But as long as they get the evidence of his crimes, they won't be charged with breaking into his lab. Suddenly, Bella knocked on the door. Professor Ariel invited her to come in. Bella reported to her that she received the letter. Professor Ariel took it off of her hands and told her not to worry because she'll take care of it. Bella was about to ask what she meant. She asked if the professor was planning to fight Varian for her sake. She also asked if she would do it all by herself. Professor Ariel was amused. Then she replied that she alone was enough. Bella turned to Gray. Gray told the professor to wait because he's also coming. Bella wanted to come too, especially that it was her problem. She told them to hold their horses because they would be going against an academy professor. Not only that, but he's also a lunatic who has repeatedly conducted dangerous human experiments. If he catches one of them, there's no telling what he'll do. She couldn't let the two of them go to such a place. Gray pointed out that all the more reason why going alone was dangerous. If he used the same power he used to take down the ogre general, he should be able to be of some help to her. He added that if Professor Ariel disappears, he, as a Divine Eye admission student, would get expelled. Hearing that made her flinch. He requested to let them decide their own fate. The professor watched them, then sighed. She could tell that they would still come even if she stops them. She agreed to let them come in one condition, that no matter what happens, they would prioritize their own safety first. She asked them if they understood. They replied, yes. Later that night in the mountains, there was a hidden laboratory, and Professor Ariel, Bella, and Gray stood hidden in front of it. Bella couldn't believe that Varian was really doing illegal experiments there. Professor Ariel confirmed that, and their plan was to look for evidence. Gray also verified that it was the place. Since they said that, Bella trusted them. But she was hesitant if they could really gather evidence without any trouble. Professor Ariel expects Varian to be at the Magic Society's conference, so he's not there. There was a good chance that the entrance was rigged with traps, so they had to bust in through the sidewall. Bella wondered if that's really okay. Professor Ariel replied that breaking into an academy's authorized lab was already a crime anyway, so it was all good. She told them to feel free to go back if they changed their minds, but she was determined to go. Before that, though, she asked Professor Ariel if she's sure because she's doing all that for someone like her. Gray told her that she was wrong, because stopping the experiment was for the world's sake. If they don't, countless people would die. More so, the world would be sacrificed. Bella asked him what he meant. Professor Ariel expressed that what Gray said might be an exaggeration, but she agreed that he must be stopped. She told Bella not to worry too much. She clarified that they weren't putting their lives on hold because of her. Then they moved out. Our waifu professor immediately summoned lots of magic circles. She attacked the laboratory and made the wall collapse. It was such a huge explosion. Gray couldn't help but think it was over the top. Now that there's a hole on the wall, they stepped in. Gray's eyes widened in what he saw. It was such a dark alleyway with cells on the side. and there were people who were skin and bones chained on the wall. Some bled from the lost limbs or punctured body. Just by seeing that, Professor Ariel could already tell that there was no need for them to make an effort in looking for evidence. There were so many of those people. Just a glance was enough for Professor Ariel to see 14 forbidden spells which were criminal offenses in and of themselves. There wasn't even a need to mention the unauthorized human experimentations, an equally serious offense. While they were roaming, something caught their attention. It was some sort of an altar. Bella asked what they should do. Their plan was to leave with evidence, but it made her ask if they should rescue the trapped people too. Gray replied that they shouldn't stay there for long because Varian might return. To his surprise, someone spoke behind him and asked if he called for him. Professor Ariel asked what happened to his conference. It was Varian. They were all surprised that he's there. He replied that he arranged for a double to go there in his stead because he had an important experiment to do there. Professor Ariel asked about that important experiment. He replied that he got some fresh materials, and he wanted to use them while they're fresh. He was talking about the bodies lined up hanging in one of the cells, but he had changed plans. Hearing that sent shivers down their spine. He wanted materials with more potential for magic than the average person anyway. He had no idea how they caught wind of his experiments, but he's certain that they didn't tell anyone that they would be coming there. So if they all suddenly went missing, no one would suspect him. Professor Ariel realized that he was saying that he's going to use them as lab rats. Varian told her to relax, and her sacrifice would push the boundaries of magic itself. And since he can't let them live alive, he'll make sure to use them as best as possible. He was caught off guard when a large fireball almost hit him. It caused a huge explosion. Even Professor Ariel didn't expect it. Bella was the one who attacked. They watched as the smoke disappeared, and saw Varian, amused and unscathed. He expressed that divine eye Ariel still hasn't lost her edge. He didn't expect that a special admission student like Bella would be such an exceptional talent. It made him consider looking at the other divine eye recruits as well. He expressed that he wasn't impressed with Bella's little stunt. An academy student trying to assassinate a professor doesn't make sense. Bella replied that it's better to kill than be killed, though. She missed her chance. Professor Ariel told them that they're pulling back. They already have the evidence, so the academy could handle the rest. But of course, Varian wouldn't just let them away. He released a dark orb with black flame towards them. It almost hit Bella. Fortunately, Professor Ariel blocked it, but Bella got worried for her. Varian told her it's pointless since it was one of the fruits of his research, gluttony flame. It casts fire that devours defensive magic and turns it into fuel. So in theory, it can't be blocked. The downside was that it costs a little rare material to conjure. It had broken through Professor Ariel's magic barrier. She groaned as she activated her eye and puts on an added layer of barrier. It was up as soon as the first one broke, but it cracked as soon as the gluttony flame came in contact with it. She instructed Bella to take the spell memory pouch to Gray. She told him that if Heathcote sees it, he'll know what to do. Bella taps the ground using her staff and created a wider barrier. She was confused about what she was doing and ordered her to hurry up and go. But Bella saw that the professor's barrier was cracking, so she told him to let her handle it. Professor Ariel reminded them of their promise before coming there, which was that when something goes wrong, they should put their lives first. She could tell that Varian's magic was unnatural, so defense spells won't stop it. She told them that she'll buy them some time, but she couldn't finish her sentence because her barrier shattered. She panicked, but Bella assured her that it was fine. Then, Bella's magic clashed with the gluttony flame. She shielded them while saying that his spell wasn't that strong. It just needed a slight different kind of defense magic. Varian couldn't believe it, especially when they were the only ones who knew gluttony flame's counter magic. He asked how she knew about it. She replied that someone taught her a new theory, and with it, the spell was easy. He couldn't believe that. He was furious. He asked who it was. He thought it was a traitor. He told her that if she revealed who it was, he'd give her a clean death. She asked him if he wanted to know who taught her. She smiled at him and replied that it was a secret. She hinted that he was a student from the swordsmanship course. Gray had recalled their interactions, and in reality, he just pieced the theory all together. Varian's veins popped out when he thought she didn't answer seriously. He took a red crystal and told them they would be burned alive. He crushed the crystal in his hand, and souls escaped. It went flying towards them. It was a potent, dark magic, and it covered them. Gray was concerned if Bella was still okay. She replied that the barrier can still hold, but Varian knew her mana reserves wouldn't last. With her reserves, he estimated that she got a minute at best. Bella requested Professor Ariel to attack him since she had her hands full on defense. The professor listened to her. Professor Ariel's eye glowed, and she saw a spot where the flame was thinned out. She projected mana outside the barrier. She tested it first, and slowly built up her power. Then she released her lightning magic. It came out like blades, but eventually it died out. Varian noticed that they're trying to counterattack, but he told them that their attack doesn't even reach him. Professor Ariel was in a pinch. Gray remembered that her offensive magic was one of the weakest among the staff, and with the flame's properties, it must have absorbed her spells. Bella asked what they should do. She was almost depleted. Professor Ariel had pointed out that it was the reason why she told them to run away earlier. Gray stepped forward and told them to leave it to him. Bella asked him what he's planning. Obviously, his sword won't reach Varian from there. He was certain that it would. Professor Ariel asked him if he's sure about it. If he used that power again, it could kill him. And even if he lives, his healing arm might never recover. He replied that dying along was better than all three of them dying. He assumed a combat stance. Varian noticed a red light coming from them despite them being covered in black flame. Then he saw Gray jump out. The next thing he knew, his head was thrown in the air and blood had splattered. Gray watched him with a serious expression on his face. There was a brief stillness after his attack. Bella was dumbfounded. Varian's headless body fell and his head rolled. Professor Ariel was left shocked since it was her first time seeing the real one with her own eyes. It was astonishing. Bella noticed debris falling on them. The ceiling started to fall apart. Professor Ariel used her magic to keep the debris still so it won't fall on them. She expressed that what happened was beyond her expectation. She asked him if he's all right. Gray dropped his sword. His hands were trembling as he answered that his dominant hand hurts a bit, and it was also numb. But he could still move it. He picked up his sword using the other hand. From that, she could tell that his training was showing results. He agreed with her. He knew that if the one who used that was him back in the village, he would have fainted for days and woken up unable to move his arms. Now it just left him with a hurting arm. It was quite an improvement. He realized that his training was really worth it. While he was lost in thought, Professor Ariel watched him intently. She expressed that it was thanks to him that they're still alive. She's also apologetic that he had to use that power. He told her not to worry about it. Besides, he was the one who insisted that they had to stop Varian in the first place. Still, she thanked him again. But also she requested him that if possible, he refrain from using that power for a while. Else the damage would be irreversible. She looked really worried. That caught him off guard. He thought about it and simply replied that he understands. Then, Bella called his attention. She asked if it was magic, since she didn't sense any ether at all. She was baffled since trying to explain that much power as magic was just impossible. Professor Ariel politely told her not to probe any further on that matter. And she wasn't allowed to mention a word about what she saw either. She asked why, but the professor replied that she can't promise that. She would be forced to erase her memories. Bella replied that she understood and offered a magic contract. Professor Ariel agreed to that. They signed the contract. After that, Gray asked what they should do next. He was concerned about the experiments, but he wanted to help those people first. He checked, and they looked like they were put to sleep with magic. Professor Ariel responded that even if those people aren't in danger, it would be best to take them to the Academy's medical facilities to be safe. She snapped her finger. The whole area glowed in golden light, and those people were each covered in the golden light. It is a protection from any external harm. And since that was done, she invited them to investigate further. Taking a second glance at the place again, she realized how insane it was. Illegal experimentations were being conducted as far as her eyes could see. Almost all of them involved the use of human sacrifice to produce magic catalysts, or enhance a human's magical abilities. She doesn't see any experiments relating to the liquidator, so it led her to think that it was held in a different facility. Gray finds it strange. It was where the incident that killed tens of thousands of people took place before he regressed. He wondered how a mere production of a magical catalyst could cause such an accident. Then he remembered that what killed those people in his past world was a miasma that welled from the ground. Professor Ariel saw his expression, so she asked him what was wrong. Bella checked on him too. He suspected that something was under that place. He suggested that there could be hidden passages that lead underground. Professor Ariel looked around. There were bloodstains on the floor, and dirt, but no hidden passages. Until she saw something with her special eye. She approached it. She crouched down and inspected the ground. It was faint, but she could sense traces of short-distance teleportation magic in that area. She guessed that it's a space that can only be accessed with teleportation magic. Based on the traces, the teleportation distance was around 300 meters. She could tell something was there. Gray asked if they could reach it. She revealed that she could use a short-distance teleportation gate as well. She gave it a try. A magic circle appeared on the ground. If there's nothing, the other end of the gate should lead to nothing but earth. The gate opened. They were all surprised at what they saw. It was a wide area with a lot of buildings, almost like a city. No one would ever think that there'd be a big space underneath that facility. Bella could feel a tremendous output of ether coming from all over the place, especially from the building that she pointed to. It was a simple circular structure. Professor Ariel saw that it wasn't just ether, but there was also a different kind of power, completely different from magic, leaking out there. But it was far greater than anything she had ever seen. Gray had an inkling of what the power was. Professor Ariel confirmed it. It was the Liquidator's power. Professor Ariel, Gray, and Bella entered the building, and they found an empty hallway with a single door. She then confirmed that the power was coming from there, but there was no sign of the Liquidator at that moment. She knocked on the door. Then she opened it, to which made Bella worried that they were messing with it. She told her to relax, because the door doesn't hold any power. It was just placed there as a symbol for ritual. The power wasn't in the door. It was in the magic rigs around it. Suddenly, the magic rigs glowed while Professor Ariel was at the center of it. Gray asked what happened. He thought she's trying to summon the Liquidator or something. Bella could tell the magic was way dangerous, so she suggested shutting it down at once. But Professor Ariel told them not to rush. Her prediction tells her that the setup can't actually summon the Liquidator. The door cracked, and a void of darkness started being seen on the other side. Gray got worried that the space was being torn. Bella called out to the professor. The magic slowly dies down. The two got confused, but it was just as Professor Ariel expected. She had confirmed that those devices weren't made to call the Liquidator. They just punched a tiny gap toward where it exists. Then they funnel the leaking power. The core they used to crystallize the power was most likely human lives. She could tell 10 souls were used so far, but the molding process may have taken more sacrifices. She guessed that the majority of the people they saw upstairs were taken to be raw materials. Bella inquired why they would go that far just to gather power. She wondered what they're trying to do with it. The black flame that Varian used in their fight was most likely boosted by the crystal, and that crystal was the byproduct after they finished processing it. She also knew that the catalyst won't be limited to flames. If they mass-produce the stuff, no one knows exactly what they plan to do with it. The cracks on the door were disappearing. Gray asked if Varian wasn't trying to summon the Liquidator after all, but Professor Ariel had no idea if he didn't try or he just couldn't. She inspected the magic rigs and determined that it was pushed to the limits. It could be that the setup was all they could manage. Bella looked around and deemed that the apparatus were extremely valuable. She had never seen a spatial warp magic that precise and high output. Professor Ariel agreed and revealed that making one of those would cost a nation's budget. But to have 8 of them, a single organization comes to her mind. Bella guessed that it was the Discar Empire, but it wasn't it. They may be the world's biggest country, but they probably don't have the magical research resources to build one of those. Bella inquired who it could be. Professor Ariel thought of an organization whose magical research dwarfs even the Empire. Gray figured out that it would be the World Union Academy. Bella was slightly confused. Professor Ariel told him he was right. There was no other research body that could support that kind of scale and budget. There was a moment of silence between them, until Bella broke it to confirm if the Academy was actually behind it. She hardly believes it because the World Union Academy was supposed to defend the world from threats. Professor Ariel could understand why she doesn't want to believe it, but also she couldn't think of any other group that could pull that off. Gray argues that it doesn't mean that the whole Academy was their enemy. He believes that most people there would be on their side, because before his regression, the Academy's top forces were the ones on the front lines. Even beyond the subjugation squads, they kept protecting civilians right until the very end. After seeing that future, he can't believe that the Academy was humanity's enemy. Professor Ariel pointed out that it was just as he said. Most of the Academy probably acts for humanity and wouldn't allow experiments that waste lives. However, the Academy has countless researchers as well as facilities. Hardly anyone in the world truly knows the whole picture. And she could tell that whoever was behind Varian had some serious backing. He couldn't have arranged all of that with his authority alone. Bella realized that they couldn't fully trust the Academy either. Professor Ariel had watched the Academy from the inside for decades. One thing she could say is that it's not an organization that they can blindly trust. Most of the people inside thought they're actually doing what's best for humanity. Even the ones behind the experiments had probably convinced themselves that it was for the greater good. She could only say that the truth was buried in the dark. Gray probed her for any idea on how they could find the mastermind. She looked around but had not found any communication devices in the facility. Not even the Maker's magic residue was left in the rigs. The cover-up was so thorough that finding any would prove difficult. Then she sensed something. A loud explosion happened behind Bella. The roof caves in. It suddenly became chaotic. She inspected it and saw that they also even installed evidence-erasing mechanisms. But they didn't blow up the place the moment Varian died, which led her to the assumption that they were planning to lure the ones snooping around before detonating the place. Bella screamed that it wasn't time for a hypothesis because they had to get out of there quickly. Professor Ariel told her to calm down because it was just magical explosives. She claimed that the World Union Academy's professors weren't weak to be killed by something like that. Professor Ariel created a magic circle and told them not to step out of it. The magic rigs around them also glowed. This has been really a close call. Luckily, they disappeared just right before everything fell apart. Outside the laboratory, it was where they teleported, along with some other people. Everyone who was captured made it out safely. Bella really thought that she'd die. Gray commented that they're too close to the lab to feel comforted. Professor Ariel responded that they had more baggage than she expected, so it slowed teleportation down. But it was worth it, because they were also able to take the magic rigs. Once they show it to the Academy, they won't be able to ignore them anymore. The night deepened. And on the next day, they were informed that the survivors were being treated in the Academy's medical wing. The one who told them the news was the World Union Academy headmaster, Orodrom Alexandro. He expressed his gratitude to them for stopping Varian's illegal experiments. Then he brought up the topic of the magic rigs. Each one of it is worth more than a national budget. Professor Ariel knew that, and there were 8 of them. She's certain that there was no way he could have gathered that kind of firepower alone. She wondered how he obtained those. He answered that it was stolen goods. They were hijacked mid-transport, and 78 transport agents were wiped out. That was surprising news. Hearing that 78 transport agents of the Academy were dead, she remembered an incident 15 years ago. Alexandro confirmed that the stolen cargo back then carried those magic rigs. Professor Ariel recalled the one responsible for it. He revealed it was Blood Drinker. He assumed she knew him. Gray was familiar with them, the world's biggest crime organization. Bella described them as parasites of the world that always crawl back, no matter how many times people crush them. Her intense description made Gray glance at her. But it made sense when she revealed that they killed her parents. Alexandro confirmed her description because despite being exterminated hundreds of times, they still resurfaced. No one knows where they hide or who leads them. Some say over 10% of all crime-related deaths were their doing. It wouldn't surprise Alexandro if some of their people were already inside the Academy. What's worse was that there's no way to tell them apart. Even if there was, the Academy wouldn't act on it. That made Gray raise his tone as he asked what he meant. Professor Ariel replied that it's how the Academy operates now. Anyone with talent gets a chance to grow stronger no matter their bloodline, race, or gender. Alexandro confirmed that, and added that it also doesn't matter if they're criminals. Bella yelled that it was absurd. She argued that if there were criminals, they should be dealt with. Alexandro agreed, however, the higher-ups don't seem to share that view. She was confused because he was supposed to be the headmaster. He replied that he's nothing more than an underling. He clarified that he's the face of the Academy on paper, but the authority he actually held was laughable. He asked them if they truly want to know who's running things. Gray and Bella nodded. Alexandro then responded that they had to grow stronger, because the more power they prove they have, the deeper they'll be allowed into the Academy and the more secrets they'll uncover. He can't name names, but he informed them that they had an upperclassman who had enough influence to shape the Academy's entire direction. Even that crazy policy of accepting criminals was his decision. Gray wanted to confirm his thoughts, and Alexandro responded that they too could even change the Academy. Because their strength was everything. That made those two determined. It was evident on how they clenched their fists with their hands shaking. Alexandro finds it amusing. Because he knew Ariel shouldn't stand a chance against Varian at all, so it meant that one of those 2 students had done it. He couldn't deny that Ariel's divine eye was sharp as ever. He couldn't wait to see what kind of monster she trains. After that, Gray walked the hallway alone. He checked the mark on his arm. as he thought of how power rules the academy. Whether they want to take down the liquidator or uncover what's going on behind the scenes, they'll need to focus on getting stronger first. When he looked up, he saw someone, so he excused himself. But to his surprise, the guy kicked him instantly. He blocked it with his forearms, but he was still pushed away. His feet were dragged. Until he found his balance. The person who kicked him commented that he's tougher than expected. Gray asked him what his problem was. The guy was offended by the question, because it was Gray who was walking around like he owned the place. The guy claimed that a special admission reject like him doesn't belong in the hallway. Gray realized that he's one of those who hate the special slots, but this was the first time someone actually kicked him in the hallway. Gray had to confirm if he's picking a fight. The guy wanted to, but reject number 2 showed up. Gray turned to see who he was talking about, and just like that, the guy left. While the guy walked away, he talked to someone. He apologized to that person and explained that surveillance was tight, so he couldn't get any closer. Then he promised to send someone else there soon. This guy was talking to Varian, and just as we thought, that old traitor is still alive. Professor Ariel asked Gray what happened. He replied that some random student kicked him while saying that a Divine Eye special admit like him shouldn't even be walking around the academy's halls. Since there were no weapons or injuries, Professor Ariel couldn't officially do anything about that, so she suggested that he chase him down and punch the lights out of him. Gray was surprised to learn that he's allowed to do that. She couldn't technically permit him as his professor, but she reasoned that her eyesight's been getting pretty bad lately, so if something were to happen nearby, she might not notice it. She acted the part to look more convincing. Gray finds that way too suspicious, so he decides to leave the guy alone. He didn't want to cause any more trouble. She thinks it was such a shame. But she was curious if Divine Eye special admits were disliked that much. He told her that some people made fun of them sometimes, but it was the first time that it had gotten physical. She realized that her students were being mocked. She apologized to him. She felt bad not having more authority in the school. He assured her that there's nothing to worry about. If it weren't for her, he wouldn't even be in the academy. And he was certain that Bella and the others would prove that the Divine Eye program wasn't a mistake. After all, she had good eyes. That left her speechless. It made her blush, and then she thanked him. Bro's Riz is getting effective. Then she told him not to act like it's someone else's problem. Because out of everyone in the Divine Eye group, he was the one she expects the most out of. She believed that Amy White, Leek Muller, Jacob Bloomfield, like the special admits before then, would all become top tier. But the first time she truly believed someone could surpass humanity itself was when she met him. He felt bothered that she compared him to them, but he realized that was a weak mindset. The mastermind behind Varian probably hasn't given up on summoning the Liquidator yet, and even those great people couldn't even scratch that thing. He came back to that timeline to make sure he could defeat it. He remembered what he was told. The fate of the world rests in his hands. After that encounter, the swordsmanship class had a live combat practice. The students paired up according to the list on the board. Gray had to be sharp for this practical training. It was because if he screws up, everyone would start bad-mouthing all the Divine Eye admits again. At the very least, he needs to show he can keep up with the regular students. But he was paired with Leonhard Apius. He's the top of the swordsmanship course. In other words, he's the strongest first-year student. The professor informed them that he matched the students of similar skill level, so they don't have to hold back and to treat it like a real fight. But Gray thought it was a joke. He wondered how he'd end up fighting the top student when he barely got in as a special admit. On top of that, the guy already hates Divine Eyes students. He expected him to be itching to beat him bloody after the incident last year. Someone then caught our MC's attention. Leonhard approached him and expressed that he's glad to be paired with him. Deep inside, since he got to spar with Gray, he felt that becoming top of the class was worth it. In Leon's mind, he trained harder than anyone. He wanted to showcase his swordsmanship to Gray. Gray's mouth twisted when he saw him. Leonhardt's smile was too bright. It made Gray certain that Leonhardt's loving the fact that he finally has the chance to beat him up legally. He stuttered when he replied that he was looking forward to it. Just look at this facial expression, dude. A few moments later, the professor asked if everyone was ready. The match began. Leonhardt attacked at once. Gray blocked him with his sword. He struggled, though. He was pushed back when Leonhardt swung his sword. Leonhardt was focused. He attacked again, and Gray barely evaded it. Then Gray gripped his sword tightly and counterattacked. Leonhardt blocks his sword while acknowledging that he was strong. It was hard to believe that he didn't make it through regular admission. They continuously clashed swords. Gray expected to get wrecked instantly, but he's actually holding up. But still, he couldn't match his raw power even with both his arms. Leonhardt's swordsmanship was insane. It was a proper by-the-book style. He described it as polite swordsmanship, but perfected to a terrifying degree. Even with the experience from his past life and his master's training, he could call Leonhardt a monster for someone in his first life. Their fight captured the attention of the other students. They were impressed how Gray was keeping up with Leonhardt. Leonhardt felt wonderful. He expressed how he could do that all day. But Gray was worried, since his stamina can't keep up. If it weren't for Heathcote's training, he'd already be down. He didn't know that Leonhardt was bothered that he still wasn't out of breath. It wasn't obvious that Gray was running out of stamina. Deep inside, Gray felt rushed to end it at once. He remembered the professor saying to fight like it's a real one. He focused and watched him attack. He ducked when the sword was swung at him, and while on the ground, he turned his body using his hand. Leonhardt was caught off guard. When Gray targeted his ankle, Leonhardt was caught off guard with his move. When he saw Gray's expression, he realized that he was treating it like a real life-or-death battle. He gripped his sword tightly. He gave his best because he couldn't afford to lose. After several clashes, eventually, those two ended up pointing their swords on each other's throat. Gray declared it was a daw. He helped him to get up. Leonhardt accepted his hand, but responded that it wasn't quite like that, because he admits that in the last instance, all he could do was swing his sword. On the other hand, Gray could have pierced straight through his heart if he had wished so. It was a mock battle, so he knew Gray was just forced to thrust the sword at his neck. Gray commented that even with all those protective spells, pointing a sword at someone's heart in a mock duel was kind of messed up. Leonhardt concluded that he lost. He thanked him for making him see the difference between real combat and fencing practice. Also, he learned that fighting wasn't just about sword skills. Gray was humble, so he replied that it was a cheat move for swordsmanship class. Leonhardt reminded him that the instructor said to treat it like real combat, so there was no such thing as cheating in real combat. So he had a suggestion, and that was to have another round. Gray didn't seem fond of the idea. He only won because he caught him off guard. If they go at it head-on, he knew there was no way he'd stand a chance. It wasn't about technique anymore. He was aware that the guy's stamina leaves him to the dust. But someone stopped them. The man pointed out that they were in a sword class, and nobody said he's allowed to use anything other than a sword. He also questioned how a special admit loser like him got paired up with the top student. He warned him not to get too cocky just because he has some magic. It wasn't like it was Gray who arranged the matchup. Leonhardt stepped in and replied that the instructor had decided that he's the only one worthy of fighting Gray. He told the guy to butt out. The instructor confirmed what Leonhardt said. He reminded them that he paired students with similar overall strength, and Gray was the only one who could take Leonhardt on. Leonhardt nodded his head in agreement. The instructor proposed to the other student to try facing Gray if he's not satisfied. If he could beat Gray, then he would be Leonhardt's opponent. He agreed. Then he told Gray that he was able to beat the examiner to enter the academy. He didn't want to be lumped by those who barely scraped a pass and a tie, or the ones who couldn't pass at all. Leonhardt realized that this guy was judging Gray by his admission category without even knowing his true strength. He saw his old self in him, but he also thought it would be a good chance to make them recognize Gray's power. More than that, he's annoyed that this guy interrupted his time with Gray. The guy noticed his expression. Leonhardt wanted to judge him with death for that crime. The poor guy was puzzled as to why he's so pissed. Since the guy didn't like the real combat rule, he agreed that they could only use their swords. He asked Gray if he's okay with that. Gray had no clue how strong the guy was, but if he got into the academy through regular exams, he knew it wouldn't be that easy. He could tell he had more stamina and strength than him. Even with his master's brutal training, he couldn't beat years of proper nourishment and conditioning. He expressed that he's not confident in his skills, but it wasn't like he'd get expelled if he lost. The instructor confirmed that he's right. It was just a practice class. But he reminded them not to go easy on each other. After hearing that, Gray agreed. As soon as the signal to begin was given, the guy charged at him. The guy was thrilled to put him into his damn place. Gray blocked the sword. He got slightly confused. He moved his sword and pushed the guy away. The guy was surprised. Gray felt that his hits were light and his powers were nothing special. Of course, this fucker attacked again. Gray wondered if he's holding back. He simply swung his sword. And to their surprise, the guy was hit and he bled. He fell to the opposite side, and the instructor announced that the match was over. Gray got nervous. He asked him if he's okay. He was aiming for his sword, but he actually hit the guy. He was expecting him to dodge. But this guy claimed that it was just a fluke and he was just caught off guard. His face was a mess with tears flowing and blood stains on his nose and cheeks. But since his ego is bigger than his brain, he challenged our MC again. The other students pitied him since it looked painful. The instructor could only sigh. Then he agreed to let them do it until they're satisfied. He charged again. Time passed by. Gray looked fine. He asked the guy if he's okay. The guy could barely open his eyes. His face was already unrecognizable from all the bruises and bumps. His speech was slurred when he replied that he's fine. He still assumed a combat stance. With his condition, the instructor had to tell them to stop. He told one of the students to take him to the infirmary. After that, he announced that the year's representatives would be Gray and Leonhardt. He asked if there were any objections from the class. Gray had no idea what representatives were. The instructor explained that the top first years would take on the second-year champion in the inter-year battle. The first years had lost 35 times in a row, but with Gray there, he had a feeling that in that year, things would be different.
Thank you all for watching. Please watch this next Giga Chad video, and I'll see you guys next time. Also, support the channel by joining the Summon Club membership. You can also support by just liking the video and being awesome.